The voice on the other side of the line was tentative and yet somehow sure. Hello, will you be in your office tomorrow? Yes. Who is this? My name is Jane. I'm the mother of another name. I recognize both, but not quite. We met, she goes on, at the General Assembly a couple years ago. I want to come and see you. I will be there tomorrow. I'm coming to tell you a story, and I need to tell you something. When she walked into my office, I recognized her right away. The last time I had seen her face, it was about this far away from mine, and she was literally spitting with anger. She was a white woman who was a parent of an adopted child of African descent. And it will be a long time before I forget that face, filled with intense anger after that panel on transracial adoption that I had been asked to moderate. It was a conversation among children who had been raised in our religious education program as transracially adopted kids, and they were inviting me to help them bring a private conversation that had been going on for years out into the open. They talked about how invisible they felt when they were told that it was better to be colorblind, or how their experiences were erased because they were different from those of their adopted parents. This mother had been among the angriest of the angry, telling me that I had permanently wrecked her home and her family. And it was one of only 2 times in my life when I have been accused of starting a riot. I'll talk about the other one another time. But the truth of it was, I did not invent that conversation any more than the Black Lives Matter movement invents the dialogue about the experience of black and brown people with law enforcement. It was just bringing it out into the daylight. Now this woman, this devoted mother, and I want to say that very clearly, had driven miles and miles out of her way because she needed that conversation we had had that I won't forget to not be our last conversation. Because what she needed me to know was that that particular conversation, that panel, the separation that she and her child experienced afterward, the conversations that led to them getting back together, was what she credited with the relationship that they had now, whereas at that time they had been almost completely estranged. She realized that love was not enough. And I will tell you, as a mother of also an adopted child, it was not a question of love. You love your children because they are your children, and nothing changes that. But she needed to be able to understand that her child traveled in a different world than she did, and she needed to listen and to learn from his experience. And she came all those miles to sit in my office and tell me that. The depth that this courageous woman faced when she finally did come to talk about things that we in our association have talked about over the years. We're in a much different place now around these issues. But they invite us into conversations that can be very scary. As a parent who loves your children fiercely, who wants to do everything they can to protect them, she had to learn things about his world that she would have much rather not known. She was afraid. And because she was afraid, she denied the very real experiences that her son, who was one of those young men who was mistaken for the employees at the hotel, had had. That same instinct, I believe, affects us in different ways in our effort to build connections across lines of difference in every aspect of our lives and in the life of our nation, which, in this nation, these lines often cut across race and class and ethnicity. For many people, as we are seeing every day, the answer is to treat people like the other and to put up a wall. And even for those of us who know that there shouldn't be a wall, we are willing to do something else and to rely on something equally dangerous, which is tolerance. Archbishop Desmond Tutu says this: "We are often reminded about the importance and necessity of tolerance. I think, however, I do not like this idea of tolerance very much. The meaning of tolerance seems to me to be like saying, I do not like you, but I have to live with the fact that you exist. I may agree to be tolerant of you, but I don't have to be your friend. I don't even have to speak to you at all. I just have to accept that you have the same right to your life choices as I do to mine." Tolerance, he suggests to us, is just enduring the reality of another person, and it does not celebrate that reality at all. Now, as human beings, we have much that we have to endure, and endurance is one of our strengths. We endure pain and grief and loneliness and fear and disappointment. And sometimes we need to feel that anger or that grief and be present with it to go on with the rest of our lives long after the events that we've been called upon to endure are actually over. And yet, in the same way, often in our own lives, in our own relationships with those that we have loved, that we love, and those that we lose, we face a similar choice, which is to either go through it in an engaged way, or to turn away and try to walk along the surface, to be aware or to engage in true presence. Once again in our nation this week, we have come to realize how great the divides are that we live across every day. And we have also come to understand, as we have been coming to understand in these years and in these months, that these lines between us are not simple. They are very, very, very complex. When we stop at tolerance in our relationships across these lines, however, it's as if we have taken half of a dose of medicine and, in fact, failed to finish the treatment and made ourselves more susceptible to the disease. To look at life only through the lens of tolerance means that we keep things at an arm's length level, that we can't really hear each other's stories. We can't really understand one another's greatest joys or our deepest sorrows. It means that we keep our conversations at this very superficial level, and we miss out on that which could really give us a path in this world in which more and more voices are demanding to be heard. You know, acts of tolerance come from very good intentions. And I have to tell you that to not spew hate in the world in which we're living actually seems like a much loftier goal than it used to a year ago. But not going further is like how we reward ourselves sometimes when we're really sad and we manage to keep it together and not cry. In the area of race, if I had even a devalued pound for every time someone has said to me that it's kind of pointless to learn to talk across lines of race here, because in our lives on this side of the tunnel, which was, of course, populated largely due to white flight from the other side, we don't have as many black people in our congregation, putting people in that role, as Ranwa's beautiful poem said. But if I had even a pound for every time someone has said that to me, I could finally take my kids on that long-coveted trip to England. Because in a frame that is open to connecting across lines of race, we could understand the fact that if we did allow some of the experience of the people who are in our midst more deeply into our hearts, we would probably have more people with us of greater variety every Sunday, and that number is growing. And we would also be enjoying deeper relationships with those who are Native American, Latino, Latina, Asian, Middle Eastern, multiracial, and more. We would also be blessed in our worship life more deeply with the gifts of those who celebrate their Jewish heritage, or those raised in the Islamic faith, or in the Hindu, Zoroastrian, or Baha'i structures of belief. We are taught in our world, which is numbed up and dumbed down, that this experience of tolerance is what we want, something which is safe and which doesn't make us think too much. But when we are tolerant, we are not actually open, and we also are not actually curious, and we can't learn. We lump people into categories, we fit them into boxes that work in our frame, and then we expect too little from them, or way, way, way too much. We get irritated when they stray from our perceptions of what they should be to us. When we stop at tolerance, we are unable to understand the complex truths of a world in which the African American experience is both Keith Scott's and Colin Kaepernick's and Brent Lee Jones's, because we are not actually living in some extended version of the people's court. We aren't Judge Judy being asked to decide who is right and who is wrong in these situations. We are people who are being asked to be vested in the world that we believe in, and to move deeper into its embrace, and to be part of its compassionate and listening heart. Now, William Barber is an African American preacher, minister, leader, civil rights leader, perhaps one of the greatest civil rights leaders of our time in North Carolina. And he said this about the events there this week: "I am a pastor. I will not condemn grief, but I was trained as a lifeguard, and I learned a long time ago that when people are drowning, their instincts can kill them, and anyone who tries to help them. If a lifeguard can get to a drowning person, the first thing that lifeguard says is, 'Stop struggling. Let me hold you up in this water, and we can get to the shore together.' We need to be the people who get to the shore together." He goes on to say, "The riots in Charlotte are the predictable response of human beings who are drowning in systemic injustice, and we must all pray that no one gets hurt and no one else gets hurt. But first, we must understand why this is all happening. We must take the time to look below tolerance and understand why this is happening. We have to be willing to invest the time in understanding the complexity that is gripping our friends and our neighbors. The same time and complexity that we would take to unpack an Italian opera or a Shakespearean play, we need to take to understand this societal grief that we are all engaged in. It's no different, really, from that private journey of grief in some ways. Enduring it is necessary, and if we choose, we can find a whole new way of understanding the world through this journey, because we choose to go through it and not simply tolerate. We are living, I believe, in a world beyond tolerance. 3 years ago, if I had said that, I would have thought that meant we were living in a world of increased multiculturalism and celebration. Right now, some of us might say that that world beyond tolerance is a world of intolerance. Some of us watched the Sharps War, Defying the Nazis film on PBS on Thursday night, and you can actually get to it now through our website, thanks to Art Ungar. In that film, there is an almost offhand comment said over scenes of goose-stepping soldiers, which says that it took only 6 months after he took power for Adolf Hitler to change the course and direction of his country. We need to be truly listening and learning, not armchair quarterbacking, and not caught in the arrogant indifference of tolerance. So what can we do? Well, we can pay attention, and we can learn. And we can be educating ourselves to these larger economic and political trends that are affecting our neighbors and making them vulnerable to the politics of hate. That's what we're going to be talking about on the Minister's Sunday Salon starting in October. We need to understand that, we can laugh at the story of the Sneetches with their, star on and star off machines. But we have, in fact, in this nation, allowed things such as the prison industry to grow. And we have allowed a permanent underclass to be created in our nation. We need to move beyond tolerance, which is to multiculturalism what Reader's Digest is to Wikipedia. You feel like you know everything you need to say, but you're leaving out a whole lot of the most important stuff. The time we live in calls for a new kind of understanding. And after services, this will be your aerobics, because we know some of you will be back for the congregational meeting, but you can dash out and sign up on some of the signs on the social justice table, because we are going to be keeping lists to help people be informed when not only they need to learn or see something, but when we need to actually be out bearing witness that we believe that there is still a possibility of love and justice. Every day, the news can tell us that we should simply despair. And that can be particularly hard if your life has also, as the lives of many in this community have done, has placed you on the list of one of its crash courses in personal grief and loss. It's hard. And maybe in those times, all we can do is just keep staying connected to the larger family of humanity wherever that connection can be for us, and deepen those connections. We would be foolish in this time not to be a little afraid, not to be a little angry, and yet I know from my own experience and journey that going through what you think you cannot go through allows you to come out the other side with a stronger and clearer vision. We can stand on the side of love, live on the side of love, and live in the depth of true knowing. Many of us are here this morning, not somewhere else, because we want to be able to say to ourselves and to others around us, to say to our children, to say to our grandchildren, to say to other people's children and grandchildren as well, be encouraged. Let's put aside division and make this one precious life that we have the way to move beyond surface understanding and easy answers down to that place of deep and respectful curiosity about who our neighbor is, and in the course of that, who we are, what our journey is, and what our journey together is. We can affirm connection and hope. We can find that place where we forgive ourselves and each other to affirm that there is more love somewhere. Beyond tolerance can be a step back into something we haven't yet seen in our world, and we can be part of creating that. It can be a step towards transformation, the transformation of our lives and the lives of our hurting communities. Let's circle round for freedom. Let's be the ones to make it so. Let's just do this thing, folks.